Thank you for watching this quick video on RushTI. It's a Python-based script available for planning analytics that lets you run a TI process in parallel. So I'm going to demonstrate that, and I'm also going to demonstrate using it with Planning Analytics Cloud. So I happen to be using a cloud server, and I know the configuration is a bit different. So I've had to guess and test a little bit. So I wanted to share what my findings with the community on how you can use RushTI with Planning Analytics Cloud in particular. So RushTI, what is it? Just like it says, run processes in parallel. CubeWise has a great blog entry and page on describing it. It's also available through GitHub, so you can pull down the Git repository from there. Shout out to John Lee. He's got a great series on using TM1py or any kind of Python tools with Planning Analytics or TM1. So if you haven't watched that, I encourage you to watch that. I'm kind of going to pick up where on one of the topics he left off on, and let's take a look at using TM1py within Planning Analytics Cloud. So just as an example, here we have a TI process which goes through and runs things for a very specific period. So here's my prologue. If I look at the parameters, only two parameters, year, month, which is coded as, YYYY, and then whether in debug mode. All the logic happens on the prologue. Generally, we create a view. I'm using the Bedrock library, and I'm also using a MDX expression to build some subsets. And I purposely create the name of the view subset, or the view name is going to have something specific to the particular year month that I'm passing in. That way, every time this runs, in each thread that this runs, it's going to create its own view for its own thread. So how do we run this process through a number of different threads at the very same time? So right now you can't run Python scripts directly on a Planning Analytics Cloud server. So you need a separate server where you can run this from. This is a machine that we have access to that has Python installed. I've also cloned the repository for TM1py and RushTI to this machine. I don't think you may need TM1py installed. If you need help with that, look at John's videos that walk you through that part as well as Python. But for the RushTI part, once you clone the RushTI repository somewhere locally, there's really just a couple of steps you do, and then you're off to the races. So the first thing is to review the config file. It's going to be in that folder. That's where you're going to enter in the credentials for your particular instance. Now for Planning Analytics Cloud, there's a couple of specific flags you'll need to set. The verify equals true and async requests mode equal true. I believe you'll need that, as well as namespace equals LDAP to connect into. You also need the base URL. The base URL needs to be formatted as really your full server name with /TM1/API/TM1 instance. So this TM1 instance is going to be the name of your particular TM1 instance that you're connecting to. So once you've got the config set up, you can craft a text file. There's some samples available here. The text file is really just going to say, every row, just give it an ID as a number. You can identify if there are predecessors, whether they're required or not, which instance are we connecting to, and what are we running? What's the process to run? So in my case, I'm going to run the same process, and I'm going to pass in different parameters for the different periods that go through. So here in my file, I've just got 12 lines that say, hey, run the same process for each of these 12 periods. And then to run it, I can open a command prompt, I'm going to navigate to the RushTI folder. I'm keeping everything in that same folder. To run this thing, you're in Python, RushTI.py, pass in the parameter of what file I'm looking at. So the file I've crafted is fy22.txt, and the number of threads you want to allocate to this run. So here I'm going to allocate 24. And there we go. So now it's starting to run. It's running for those 24 threads. So how do we know it's running for those 24 threads? So now let's flip over to Planning Analytics Cloud, where we can actually see the 24 threads running. And now we can see that indeed we have, from a particular user, a number of the same processes running in parallel. There's no wait states. You can see how long each run is running for. Now this is, for my particular purpose, this is very helpful because I was noticing blocking. If I ran this sequentially, Each period would take about 6 minutes. So rather than take 6 minutes times updating 48 months each, each night, I can run this in parallel, and it just consumes more resources more CPU resources when it runs, and completes much more quickly. So each of these times where I'm seeing the post action of the same TI process mentioned, this is being run from that same automation user. And we can also flip over to the details, and we can kind of see that indeed I've got a lot more CPU usage running than I would normally have if I just ran this as an individual thread. So on some of these more beefy boxes, you're going to have a lot of CPU that doesn't get used. This is a really good way of reducing the amount of time for ETL, as well as using some maybe unused resources on the server while ETL is running. So I hope you enjoyed the video. This is all about how you can use RushTI to run TI processes in parallel, particularly with Planning Analytics Cloud. Thanks for watching.